you emailed me with regards to disagreements in immigration. Do you remember what it was that we disagreed on?
Yeah, so I've been YouTube gave me you've got a very sultry voice. It's very calming and you talk for just hours on end and that I like that. And so I've just been kind of watching your videos and a point that comes up a lot for you is that you will perhaps hyperbolically say that any amount of immigration is fine. You want more people, lots of people, fill it up. It's good for the economy. It's good for the country. And that I disagree with. But I would say I agree with you on a lot of things. A lot of your politics, somewhat align with mine.
Well, certainly not the ones in immigration, at least. So yeah, like we can get right to it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, when it comes to immigration, I guess like ultimately, if you look in our past in American history, there are plenty of examples where the presence of immigrants is used as an excuse to depress wages for local workers. But I've only ever thought of it as just that, an excuse. I mean, in reality, right? There's absolutely no reason why the presence of immigrants should lower the wages for anyone who's already working in any given industry. The only reason they do usually is because the business owner can use them as a pretext. They can point and say, "Oh, well, I don't mean to cut your wages. It's these immigrants coming in." And I feel like it's a way of displacing class antagonism against the bourgeoisie towards other ethnic
Well,
groups.
I actually worry about that. Part of my problem with it is that it does put ire towards it. I don't blame immigrants for wanting a better life. Should I give like an opening thesis for why exactly I believe this?
Sure, go for it.
And I can give you some stats on it too. So, um, I am not racist, and I know what you're thinking. That's something a racist would say. But I grew up in a very multicultural area, and my whole life I've been surrounded by immigrants. And immigration is fine, and a certain grade of immigration is fine. And historically, immigration is fine. But we're looking at the 21st century with globalism and a global capitalist system that is starting to almost eclipse and ruin governmental power to an extent. So I think this is a recent phenomenon, and it's actually not occurring in the United States. United States for the last 10 years or so has had immigration go down slightly, and some amount of immigration. I mean, I'm talking to Vosh right now, viewers, is necessary, right? But in certain countries, and I'll speak to my own, you've seen a huge ramp up in immigration, specifically by corporate interests, and it does suppress wages. And so I guess I'm not saying that America has an immigration problem, but I feel like the left wing inclination to say that there's like a left wing inclination to protect people who are minorities and to push back against, that sort of thinking. And there's a fascist anti immigration ethos. And I feel like the ruling class loves to use social issues to enact, economic war on the working class. And in this case, left wing people are playing right into um, their hand by not recognizing that, yes, over immigration can be used as a tool to increase property prices. And I have some stats on that. And it can be used to suppress labor prices. Um, like that's obviously supply and demand. And in America, you have 300 million people, but you're also actually lowering immigration. And that's also correlated in the last 10 years with an economic improvement. Your highest immigration rate was in 1998, and that was correlated with a GDP drop and with a housing price increase. And I don't want to say it's the only factor, but it definitely, when housing goes up faster than other investments, it got seen as an investment, it gets overinvested in, and then you end up with the 2008 housing crisis. And I feel like a similar thing on a monumental scale is occurring in Canada right now. And so I don't think just let anyone in is actually a good idea.
Yeah, so my first of all, I don't think that the evidence actually indicates that immigration depresses the wages of local workers. Um, I think that the only group of local workers whose wages go down as a consequence of new immigration are other immigrants, like previous immigrants, and a lot of that is because they compete in the same markets.
Depends on the
Immigrants.
immigrant.
Hmm?
Like you can have tech immigrants. You can immigrate people from India to do tech jobs or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
Like
And there are like the H-1B visa immigrants who like the ones who left over at Twitter or whatever. But I mean, a lot of the immigrants we get over here in America
you
are
you don't think
illegal.
thousands of tech workers working for Twitter would suppress software wages?
It doesn't seem
Like
to. Because
It's
H-1B
supply.
visas are only offered when companies do a check to see if they can fulfill that role within the
Yeah, but
local labor market.
that's like that's obviously, leveraged by corporate interests who control politics. They'll say they do that in Canada with temporary. Right now, Canada's importing a million and a bit people a year, and it's causing huge problems, and it's causing anti-immigration
Why why would that
sentiment.
lower the wages though? I mean, whether or not they're
Supply and
pulling.
demand, basic supply and demand. If you need a software worker to work at your company, if five major companies need a software worker and there's four software workers, the companies have to fight each other over the wage and offer more competitive wages. If there's four local workers and then you immigrate in six people, and now the five software companies have to. It's like basic supply and demand,
But when it comes to
right?
H-1B visas, we're pulling people from out of the country, usually because we can't fill the market locally. And those H-1B visa workers are paid what local workers would be as well. It's not like a corporate benefit. They're not like
But
cutting
it's
out
still
wages for
adding.
those people.
You really think the corporations are importing tons of people to do jobs and they're not at all finicking with that, and it's not an attempt in
Well,
any way
I
to
mean,
get cheaper workers?
I think
Like, why bother? Why not just get them in the local economy? There's tons of software workers in America.
well,
Like, the obvious reason is to lower their expenditures.
but that doesn't seem to, like, the data doesn't suggest that actually happens. And I think in a lot of cases we legitimately just do need workers from out of the country. I mean, we have a lot of people here in the States after all, but unemployment isn't that high, and there are literally millions of people from out of the country who would happily jump in for a job if they're better qualified, which I imagine a lot of them are. I mean, they have to be. um, then it would make sense that a corporation would want to give them money. But if that's the case, I don't really see an issue with that. I mean, whether the money goes to them or to a local worker, it's a prole being paid for their labor. I don't really care whether it's an American
Yes,
prole.
I'm not against any and all immigration, but there is a danger to local population, and there's a upper class. It's a tool of the upper class to squeeze out the middle class and to suppress wages in order to lower, you know,
But
their expenditures.
I don't think it actually is though. So
Well, like a
this
guy
is,
from India is going to accept a lower wage than a guy from
but
from
they don't though. Like that's the colloquial logic. But
in
when
in in a Twitter situation, sure, because that's a extremely high skill thing. So you're still competing for extreme. Like, a software engineer can be 100 times as good. It's one of the few fields where a software engineer can be 100 times as good as another software engineer. Do you know what I mean? It's
sure,
almost
but
like art. It's a creative field.
even if we're talking about immigrants broadly, why not just have them be paid the same amount? You know, we don't have to accept corporations lowering wages. If a corporation needs a
That's
given
true.
number of
Corporations have
workers,
never abused worker wages or tried to suppress
well,
wages
no,
in
well,
any
that's
way,
the
and they are
no,
benevolent entities, I
no,
find.
that's my argument. They do that anyway, whether immigrants come in or not. I think the problem is that when corporations just start lowering people's wages out of nowhere, it's very transparently the corporation doing it. Whereas if there are immigrants, the
Yeah, but
corporation can point at the immigrants and go, "Oh no,
this
this
is
is the reason
all
why."
this is all to the background of inflation and wages that don't keep up with inflation. So you can say, oh, they hire them at the same price, but every year like this year, inflation is 5%. So every single worker should be making 5% more. But we brought in a bunch of people from India
Do you know
who
that's
have,
why the wages haven't kept up?
well, I mean, fiat currency as a whole is like a convoluted system to
Well,
extract
yeah,
wealth from
but
people.
you're doing the thing then. You're just assuming it's because of immigration with no evidence to the case because
No,
it's like an
I'm
easy
not
thing to
assuming
point
it.
at.
It's corporations will do anything to suppress wages. There's a million ways that they suppress wages. I'm just saying that if the corporation brings in 1,000 new immigrants and those immigrants make the same wage, and then they don't have to increase anyone's wage, and then inflation increases and their stock cap increases, and all the CEOs get more money and their investments go up, but all the worker things go the same. And you say, oh, but those workers work for the same price. But because they don't need to, someone asked why I'm giving this asshat
Uh,
a platform.
never look at chat. It's a classic mistake.
All I do is
So
look at chat.
the
It's
the
where the money comes. Tip me, you fuckers. Sorry.
the problem
Um,
is the thing that you're describing happens whether immigrants are coming in or not. like corporations seeking to depress wages, not raising them with inflation.
Yes, but
This is a
increasing the supply
global.
of wages, is going to
So
make it easier
that's
for them to suppress
that's the
wages.
common logic, but I don't think it's
But I
true.
have
And the
data
data.
that backs that up as
Sure.
well.
So I'm looking at an article from the National Bureau of Economic Research, which discusses the
Economic
impact.
articles, I'm not a huge fan of.
I
They're generally pretty biased, and they generally wave away the negative effects, and they'll say things like, I was looking at it and it was saying something like it would have a negligible effect, but then you get into the article and a negligible effect is 5%, which for someone making $50,000 a year is $2,500. That's not negligible.
for a
And
lot.
also, the negligible effect happens to be inflation, which is a tool of the government and the ruling class to slowly squeeze people out.
So I disagree with that, and I don't have a problem with fiat currency or even inflation as a concept. But the negligible effect is that most people in the economy benefit from immigration. Because
I'm
the
not
more
against
immigrants
it.
come in, the more money there is circulating in our country. And the more money there is circulating, the more jobs there are to be had by people who already lived here. The more money there is to be made off of the trade and sale of goods, the services rendered. Now, there are people who lose out, of course. Like, for
This is
instance,
what happens every time. This is totally neoliberal, and I'm a big
no, it's no,
neoliberal.
this is just how, no, wait, no, no,
No,
no. You,
like with NAFTA, when they did NAFTA, they said, "Oh, a bunch of people will be left out," and I've heard you say this exact thing,
I
where you
didn't say
say,
a bunch of
"But
people. It's
a set
Americans without
group."
a high school degree.
Yes, and then you say, but those people can be handled. But with NAFTA, when NAFTA occurred, like working class factory workers in the Rust Belt will lose out, but the country as a whole will raise up, and those people can be helped. But those people are never helped; they're just abandoned. This
And
is what
yes,
neoliberals
but
do.
blocking immigration wouldn't fix that and wouldn't make
I'm not
things
talking
better.
about blocking immigration.
So
I'm
if you
saying that.
so wait, hold on, wait, please. So let's not run away from this too much, okay? The
Okay.
data that I'm aware of indicates that most Americans benefit from immigration, like a significant majority of them.
Same with NAFTA.
There are Americans who lose out in it. The problem is that we're talking about the benefits of immigration. If we remove the immigration, that would not be beneficial to American workers who don't have a high school diploma. It wouldn't fix the problem because the problems that you're talking about with regards to the exploitation of the working class happen in every country on earth with or without readily available
Yes,
immigration.
and so the ruling class of this country is trying to import countries with lower standards, lower workers' rights, lower worker pay into this country. In America, America's
No,
immigration
but
is
they don't
currently
bring
good and
their
actually has
pay
gone.
to us. They a Mexican doesn't carry their minimum wage with them. They benefit from ours.
But if you have a Mexican who is used to his minimum wage and you offer him the 40K that you've paid the last 5 years that's not keeping up with inflation, he'll jump on it, and then you don't have to keep up with inflation because it
What?
lowers the demand of, or the supply, it increases the supply of labor.
That's
It's
not.
basic.
Yeah, that's
It's
no.
basic economics.
No,
The
no, no.
idea
So
that
you wait. You can't take issue with with high level economics papers while repeating Econ 101 stuff without the appropriate context. So that's not that.
I take
What
issue
you
with
describe is not how people get
hand
jobs.
waving.
People aren't offered like less. Like the recruiter sees that a Mexican has walked in and they're like, ah, and then they offer like 70% of the salary they were going to
But it's
offer.
not about the Mexican specifically taking less. The Mexican and the American worker take the same amount. But when there's more people, I'm not distinguishing between I'm not against the Mexican wanting a better job here. But if you okay, if you added 1 billion people to America right now, would wages go down?
A billion. I think there'd be so much economic turmoil from that
I
change. I
know.
don't even
So,
know.
so you admit that there's a maximum amount of immigration.
No, I don't think I don't know how a billion people suddenly joining America. I don't think that has anything to do with what our immigration cap could conceivably
You're a
be.
logic guy. You're a logic guy who likes to go down long strings of logic. So stay with me.
Huh?
1 billion people would obviously wreak economic havoc.
In any country,
So,
yeah, it's a billion
yes.
people.
And in Canada right now, 1 million people is wrecking economic havoc.
I
We're seeing
don't
housing.
know of any data to support that.
You can look this all up. I'll talk about it with you if you'd
So
like.
wouldn't all these problems then also be caused by just the population increasing, like just having a higher birth rate?
Yes, you want to set slow population increase. I would argue that
But
you don't even need a population
but we
increase.
don't
That's
see. But we also
something you
don't
have to
see
plan for.
that because in countries that have had population booms, the population booms often accompany average wage increases because the more people there are.
Yes, but those are poor countries. Poor countries have more room to industrialize and
but
grow.
the
We're in
more
modern
people,
economies.
the more people there are in a country, the more jobs you need
Yes,
too.
because there's more people in India that has less modernization.
No,
That's not
if
like a good.
here in
That's a
America,
correlation.
here in
not causation.
America as well, if you have more people entering the country, either through being
No, that's
born.
not true. The last 10 years,
Wait, I
immigration has
haven't
gone
said.
slightly down.
Wait. I
And
haven't said. Wait, I didn't make the claim yet. The
I know
claim
what the
that I
claim
was
is.
making is
I'm ahead of
when
you.
our population increases, either through immigration or through an increase in our population through local birth, it doesn't just increase the labor supply, it also increases the labor demand. Because the more
Yes,
people there
obviously.
are, the more goods and services need to circulate to meet the needs of that growing group of people.
Yes, but there is also finite resources, specifically in things like real estate. And there's also, like, you can't look at
And
historical trends. Like,
how is
industrialization
that
occurred.
immigrants' problems?
It's not the immigrants' problems. I'm saying that you over immigration, a problem that does not currently affect the United States but affects my country, Canada, is a problem. And that increasing immigration willy nilly beyond a normal growth rate is dangerous and is a problem and is a tool that the ruling class could use in your country, as they are currently in mine, to over worker wages, to increase housing and real estate prices, which benefits landowners, and to hurt the working class and the general citizens
I'm
there.
looking at Canada's annual population change, and it looks
How
like
big
for
is Bosch?
decades
Bosch, don't Google it. How big is Canada?
it's been the land area or
Don't Google
population.
population.
So the what I'm
Don't Google it.
so
Just guess.
I'm looking at the percent change, and the
Yes.
percent annual change seems to be hovering around 1% per year, which seems fine to me.
In the last, well, there's this. They're abusing it. Canada's current population. Do you want to take a guess at it? Are you looking at it already?
No, I'm only concerned with the percent growth. A 1%
I just.
increase in a national
It's
population
not
is not
increasing
like
by
a
one
huge.
percent. In the year 2022, it increased by 1.2 million people.
Okay, I mean I'm
And also
looking at the
during
percent.
COVID, immigration slowed down greatly. And you know what happened? Housing prices and rent prices went down, and wages went up. When wages spiked during COVID, hugely spiked, and the powers that be did not like that because you actually had to share some of your profits with the workers. And what happened? Now this year, well, last year now, they let in 1.2 million people.
Okay.
Too many people. And now wages have stagnated and
It's
housing
so
prices have
again,
doubled and rents
you
have
would have to
exploded.
so you would have to demonstrate mathematically that there was an actual association between
Well,
wages and immigration
you
because
keep interrupting
in
me
the no
when
well
I'm
that wait
trying.
hold on, that's not true for one. For two, in the United States, that is not what has happened. Immigration doesn't depress wages. So the data that I have seems to indicate that's just not how things work. Also, if you look at international examples in countries that are both highly industrialized and not, it seems overwhelmingly the case that there just is not a strong correlation between population increases and the average wage. Now, I do agree
Every
that
time
having
I
more
try.
people requires more housing availability, but that's not just an immigration problem over here on the West Coast in the United States. Like immigrant, it's just totally separate. It's like a 1970s boomer housing shortage problem. I don't think immigration is the issue at hand there.
Again, I'm not looking at America as having over immigration, but there is correlation between higher rates of immigration, like in 1998, American immigration spiked to its highest and then went down, and an increase in housing and a decrease in GDP per capita. And in the last 10 years, immigration has gone slightly down in America, and the GDP has actually improved. COVID kind of fucks with it at that point, but and wages have improved with a slight decrease in immigration that you've had for the last 10 years or so.
I feel like you're very spuriously grasping at trends, but there's so like we're talking about some of the
It
most
also occurred in the
complicated.
70s and 80s,
We're,
but these are minor changes because the
then
immigration changes in
I
America at these
I
times
can't
were
take
minor.
your spurious associations over decades of data that have like
But
correlated the.
you can look up the stats. You can read, I've read a bunch of economic articles and they all say the same. It's negligible. And then the amount that's negligible is under 5%. But 5% wage suppression is something.
So like
It's the
what
same.
article are you referring
Do you
to
believe
then?
it? Do you believe in rent control?
It can be done well and it can be done poorly. What studies are you
Every
referring
article,
to?
I had an argument with someone about rent control, and every economic article I would found would say that yes, it maybe lowers rent somewhat, but the other outside negative effects. Economic articles are written specifically with they're they're paid for and they're for political influence. You have to just look at raw statistics. That's the best way to get economic data. Economic
That is
articles
absolutely
are
not the case.
not like
Wait.
scientific.
No,
Economic articles
that's
are
no,
not
no,
like
no, no, no.
scientific
That
papers.
is
You don't get it.
highly anti-intellectual. You can't say that the
No,
only way. No, if all you're doing is looking at broad data trends and just spuriously associating them, then you're a
you're not
complete
getting.
slave to your biases.
But
You could look at it and derive any outcome from it because you have assumptions you bring to it. You need a
you,
firm
you you have to let me talk about
sociological
it.
mythology for analyzing the data. Otherwise,
When it
you could
comes
just point to anything.
when it comes to scientific articles in a journal, I'm super good with intellectualism. I went to school for physics. I'm not a dummy by any means. Economic journals and economic articles tend to not be very good as a source of information.
I don't know how to engage
In
with what you're
Canada,
saying when
in
when
Canada,
you're ignoring the evidence to the contrary.
in Canada, during COVID, immigration halved, wages spiked by a large amount, 10%. Then immigration increased to the highest it's ever been, 1.2 million people. Wages completely stagnated and did not keep up with inflation. And housing has almost increased 30, 40%. Rent prices, the price of a one
I
bedroom
don't.
in Canada
So
has gone from 1,500 to
what you have
2,600
to
in a year.
understand right now is that
And that's caused by immigration.
everything that you're saying right now is worthless because of the last thing you just said, and that's caused by immigration. No, it's not. And you know how I know that? Because rent is skyrocketing. It's spiking in plenty of American states right now.
Not at the rate it is in
even
Canada.
ones that are losing overall
what's the
population.
West-
Wait, hold on. Please don't interrupt me. Even in cities and states that are losing average population, housing prices and rent are still skyrocketing. The reason for
Why?
that is because of broader housing policy. The idea that immigration, like what you're doing is so the funny thing is that the data trends that you're trying to associate would only make themselves evident in this over the course of decades. But what you're saying is, yeah, in 2021 there was no immigration and big money, and then in 2022 there was lots of immigration and no money. Those
scapegoating
factors,
immigrants, Daniel.
even if they were connected, would not
I feel for
demonstrate
immigrants.
themselves in tandem that way.
They do in Canada.
No, they don't. You
Canada-
have no evidence to. Do you have
Yes,
any
I
evidence to
do.
support that case?
Yes, Canada's immigration started to increase by
no.
double. Canada doubled its immigration.
Do you
Canada
have
lets in
evidence?
how many-
I'm asking for any
Yes.
study on the effect of
fuck
immigration.
studies. Listen to me.
Oh my god.
Data is data. You just,
Yeah, data is very important. Wait,
Yes.
how can you get this defensive over something as simple as do you have any evidence to support your claim?
Yes, I do. Do you want to listen to me or not?
Is
In
the evidence just
2015
going to be you saying over and over again how you feel the ties are? You know you need information to like connect things in a correlative and causative sense, right?
Vaj, I'm smarter than you. Don't talk down.
Are
to me,
you wait,
please.
are you getting that defensive that quickly? Come
You're
on,
not
I
letting
know
me talk.
this
You're
is
not letting me talk.
so typical of a
I'm gonna
STEM
say you're not
major.
letting me talk every 10
You think
seconds.
you're bringing your knowledge with you. So do you have any evidence?
You're not letting me talk.
Do you have any evidence to
You're not
suggest
letting
a
me talk.
causative relationship between those two factors?
You're not letting me talk.
I'm asking you that question.
Are you gonna so data isn't evidence to you?
Individual data points is objectively not
A
the
10-year
same
period
as
of you won't let me finish a
how
fucking sentence.
are you did you get your degree or did you just go in for a couple days of study? Did
Would
you pop
you
into a
like-
community college course and listen to a few
Bosh,
days
that's
of a
an ad
lecture?
hominem. That's an ad hominem.
No, I'm
You're
genuinely
talking-
asking because
No,
even
you're
for
talking down to me.
even
You
for
still,
a
we've
STEM
been doing this for 3 minutes now. Are you
even
gonna let me
for
talk,
a
or are you
STEM
gonna fucking jerk yourself off, dude?
even for a
'Cause
no,
come
I'm
to
not on
J49
Chatterbait. I can't do that. I would do that on your site.
J49.com. J49.com if you want to do that.
Even-
and I know you like trans girls. That's what
Even
pan means.
for a STEM major, you should know that you
Oh my
need
God.
specific data analysis in order to draw causative relations between
How
two
does
data
data
points.
analysis occur, Vosh?
Through analysis? That's a very broad question. What do you mean?
So am I able to analyze data? I'm a
On
human
your
being. I
own?
know
No,
Yes,
you
are.
saying that
Where
two
do you
things
think
are
data
connected
analysis
because they
comes from?
you
Where
think
do you think
that
the-
two things are connected because they happen at the same time is not the same as a methodology for analyzing data. You can't control for variables in your head by saying these two things happen at the same
I
time.
can. Maybe
therefore.
you can't.
Do you
you want me to
believe in
finish
what
this?
you're saying right now?
Yes. Do you want to listen to me for more than one sentence? How can I construct an argument when you won't like let me say anything?
Typically, when we talk about like high-level econ stuff, usually what you try to do is you try to use some kind of methodological process to arrive at a conclusion, because otherwise you can just draw any conclusion you want.
What's
If
up? What?
if I
How many
wanted
years do you
to,
take to draw? How many years do you take to draw a conclusion? If
I,
something occurs, if okay, can you let me fucking talk, dude? It's been 5 minutes of this of you just shitting on me. Do you want to debate, or do you want to let me get a paragraph out, or is your entire show you just shitting on people?
do
Because
you
I'm not a fascist,
do you
and so I
have
don't really appreciate it.
do you think you have the time to run over to a journal and get your high-level methodological analysis published so that you could present it to me in the form of a study?
You want me to write an entire scientific study could you just listen to me?
Okay, tell me about how
You're
immigration
jerking your
happened and the wages changed or didn't
in
change or whatever.
Canada.
In Canada, right?
In Canada. In 2015, immigration doubled in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's now almost triple. What's the immigration rate to America? It's like 900,000, something like
I
that.
think it varies between 0.6 and 0.9% of our population yearly.
And you're 300,000 people, so 0.9% would be 9 per thousand, so 1,800. 1.8 million, maybe something like that. 1.5 million. You said 0.2 to 0.9, so more like a million. A million's a good guess. A million's in between those two numbers you just said. So a million. And your population is actually an eighth of ours now. It used to be a tenth a couple decades ago. Random. And so our immigration with an eighth of the population, used to be a tenth of the population, is higher than yours in 2022. So a country of 300 million people immigrated less people than a country of now 40 million people. That's why I wanted you to guess, because your guess would have been about 32 million. Over the last 8 years, immigration in Canada has increased exponentially versus Western nations. And we do so through schemy little means. We have your normal immigrants, but then you have your permanent residents. And then you have your temporary foreign workers, and then you have your international students, and your international students get permanent resident status. And all of this has ballooned our population hugely. We increased by 1.2 million people in 2022. Over this same period, housing in Canada has gone out of control.
All right, can
housing
I
in
wait?
Canada
I want
is
to
the
ask
largest
about that.
bubble-
I want to ask about that. So you talk about how many
It's the
people,
largest housing bubble on Earth.
right? You talk about how many people have arrived in Canada in 2022. So I googled Canada immigration rate each year, and it says about
Immigration rate is people who get in with a green card. That's not all immigration.
oh
There's temporary foreign workers and there's international students. International students don't count as immigration, but they get they get permanent residency after their studies.
okay.
It's statistical lying. When you look up that stat, it's not true. The actual amount of people in Canada increased by 1.2 million people.
Okay.
And the number
Can I
and one in
see that?
38 Canadians is a international student.
All right.
1 in 38 Canadians is an international student
So
currently.
I would like to see that. What could I Google to find like
Oh,
total number of
God.
added people, as opposed to just the
Mhm.
immigration rate?
Let me see if I can find
I
it.
don't know if international students would necessarily even be able to depress wages anyway, because
I
they're
mean,
students.
you can Google temporary foreign workers and see that according to the Global Mail in 2021, temporary foreign workers went up by 68%. And that's just the temporary foreign workers. Those don't count as immigrations. You can Google that. I'm not going to find all these stats. What I'm saying is
Just
true.
one. Oh, well, okay, it's just one stat, and it's central to your
How
argument. I
many-
feel it's
any
valuable
temporary-
to give it a look.
Canada 2023. In
Canada.
total, 472 work permits in 2022. So that's just temporary foreign workers.
Okay.
So whatever immigration stat you looked at, which probably said 500,000, which is half what you guys do, and we're a tenth the size, ninth the size, eighth the size.
Okay.
Funny how that keeps happening.
So-
So our immigration is already 4 times yours. Then temporary foreign workers is another 472,000 people. You can Google that right now. How many temporary TFW Canada 2023?
Okay.
And
So
then
I'm looking at
now we're at a million.
So
we're
I'm-
already over you.
so
So that's my claim
I'm
right there.
looking-
That's not even.
I'm looking at a site that says for the year 2022, Canada welcomed about 437,000 immigrants and saw a net increase in the number of non-permanent residents estimated at 607,000. So those two are separate numbers, you're saying, like together they
Yes,
combine.
they are. And that goes over a million, which is over America's immigration,
Uh-huh.
which is a country 9 times the size of ours. So yes, our immigration is absurdly high for no real reason. We also have the biggest housing bubble in the world. We're kind of a shitty country. It's like cold here and not that great. It's super gay. You should come visit. We can bang. But it's not actually like great.
Wouldn't
Like
that,
Vancouver's so
if I
overrated.
visited, wouldn't that also suppress wages for local workers?
No, you can just sleep in
Well, I don't want to
my
contribute to the
den.
problem.
But you'd be sleeping in my den. It's not.
Wouldn't that
It's
also
empty
take
right now.
opportunities away from local Canadians?
To have sex with me? No one here is. Look, what were we talking about? I lost track. So, do you agree my statistics are correct then? We've just proven it's a million people.
Yeah, it's
Like,
weird they
you're real. I watched that fascist debate you did yesterday. My God, what a headache. And you're doing a lot of the things he did. You're arguing with me on these statistics. You don't need to. Everything I've ever said is right, Bosch. I need you to do that so we can move along. I don't want to waste so much time.
Are you drunk?
No, I'm having the worst day. No, no, I'm not drunk.
Are you sure? Because your
My
voice wavers.
That's because it's fake. You want to hear my real voice?
I don't think any voice is fake, but sure.
I'm kidding.
Okay. I
It's a
think you're
little
drunk.
dry. You think I'm drunk?
I think you sound a little drunk. I don't think that invalidates
That's
your...
an ad hominem too. I'm pretty smart if I'm drunk, wouldn't you say?
I don't disagree that Canada has welcomed a large increase to its population. I think that's...
Cool. Cool. So we spent 5 minutes to come to the conclusion that Jade is right. See how many
Well,
times that happens, and
so
then maybe stop questioning me.
I didn't
So
disagree with that.
next sentence. You wanted statistics. I gave them to you. Can we move past it?
What I disagreed with was the idea that this
Yes.
causatively determined a depression or stagnation in wages.
Okay. But in order to form an argument, I have to get through more than one sentence. Second sentence. We're getting there, everyone. Hi, Vash at jade49.com. I'm very pretty. Okay, second sentence. All right, you with me? Between 2015 and 2023, Canadian housing has almost doubled in price. Rent has almost doubled. Through that time period, people are struggling, especially as it turns out, the immigrants. The immigrants don't have the support. They can't move into their parents' basement, which a lot of 35-year-olds are doing. I'm very pretty, so I can afford my apartment. But my apartment, the rent for it is higher than the minimum wage. It's 120% for a 1.5 bedroom of the minimum wage. And housing has exploded over this period. And who owns houses? Rich people. In fact, REITs have popped up in the last 10. Do you know what an REIT is?
No, I don't.
It's so, you want to buy a house to Airbnb so that you can make money and you can force someone to be homeless while letting tourists like Vosh come and hot trans streamers, right? But tenants are like a headache and they can wreck your place and stuff. So instead, a big company buys a bunch of places and then you can buy it as a stock on the stock market. That's a thing that's popped up in the last 10 years or so. It's basically corporatization of Airbnb and the effects. Would you agree Airbnb is bad?
Yes.
It's basically the corporatization of Airbnb. And so you have all these rich people who own all these. Did I not say REIT?
You
And
did.
then I said what it was. Sorry, you're right. See, Bosch is often right. Don't listen to the chat. So, REITs have popped up in the last 10, 20 years, and they basically commodify housing. It's a part of why housing has gone up so much in your country. But in my country, it's through the roof. Rich people own in my country's parliament, something like 50% of the parliament owns either stock in an REIT or multiple investment properties. So there's a vested interest in the investment class and in the politicians to keep housing increasing. Housing is actually a huge part of the Canadian economy. No one pays taxes here except for me. I'm the only you can Google this, Bosch. I'm the only taxpayer in Canada currently. And so what we've seen now is a giant increase in homelessness and a suppression of wages. And the interesting part, and you were asking for some correlation, is that when COVID happened and immigration tanked down to like 150, 200,000, the normal amount of immigration for a country our size in the Western world, wages for a year or two after that, for about a year after that, increased markedly. Whereas they've stagnated for decades, they haven't kept up with inflation. They've been 1%, 2%. Suddenly, when we don't import another million people, wages spiked 15%. And then that freaked out the whirling class because keeping wages low is how stocks, I'll give you my idea on how to, they should take half of corporate stock profits and split it with the workers based on hours worked. Everything is solved by doing that. But that's a side point. Stocks only go up when companies pay workers less because it's the stealing of the labor of the workers. So you need the laborers to be paid less. And as it turned out, when they didn't bring in 700,000 people, Econ 101, they start with 101 because there are some principles there that are actually meaningful, Vosh. Turns out when 700,000 less people came, wages increased by the most ever by like I don't remember all these numbers. I don't remember my birthday by a two-digit amount. Then 1.2 million people come in the next year and wages stagnate immediately again. All the while, housing is going up. People are becoming homeless. People are being forced out of their rent. They're being rent evicted. Everything is going to shit. The healthcare system can't keep up. Socialized healthcare in Canada is garbage right now. I'm not against socialized healthcare, but conservatives ruin everything in our country too. And that's why when you say let in any amount of immigrant, I'm telling you, there's an amount of immigrants that's too much. And you're not at it. You're actually lowering your immigration over the last 5 years. So you're in luck.
Okay. So there's a lot to respond to here.
That's a lot of talking. You let me talk. Thank you. I love you.
My
You're very
pleasure.
pretty.
I
like your
love letting women speak. Now
Yes, as long as you can be casually sexist. Me too.
I have spent this time looking at data. Now,
Oh God.
I want to say I don't
Don't.
think that any amount of immigration is good. I do understand that there are acceptable amounts by which you can increase a population. I didn't mean to imply, and if I gave the wrong impression, then this was my mistake, that literally any amount of immigrants coming in could be good. Now, you're
Mhm.
talking about the impact immigration has had on Canada specifically. So here's the issue, okay? You should
Mhm.
know this because you
I know
have
everything. Yes.
an understanding of physics and proper research methodology. It's that
Sure.
it
Not
is
in a while.
incredibly easy to find associations when you are primed to do so. Now,
Yes, I know about biases and all that.
right now in
But
a
like the stats are pretty
now
straightforward.
our understanding of economics is heavily informed by talking heads in the media. This is the West broadly.
I
There's a
don't really
strong what please
pay attention
please
to media.
hold on please. There is a very, very strong tendency to gesture at immigrants when we are discussing wage depression. This is a literally centuries-old tactic. In America, you can go back to Latin immigration, the beginning of
We're
the
in a
20th
globalist society. I don't
century.
think that historical data matters at this point.
No,
A
it does
person
because
can find.
it's the
No, it
same
doesn't.
pattern every
We
time.
don't
Wait,
get to
please,
places
please,
by
please,
railroad anymore. We get
please,
there by plane.
please.
It's not
It has
relevant.
nothing to do with the specific ways in which people move and everything to do with the labor supply, which is the same argument you're making. So you have made my point that this tendency to attribute the increase in labor provided by immigration to any existing problems with wages or workers' rights, this goes back a long time. We did it with Latin people back at the beginning of the 20th century. We did it with the Italians and the Irish as they came into New York City.
Definitely have an American perspective.
I am American. We did this with the Chinese as they helped bring our railroads up to par on the West Coast. So the problem that I have is that
You see your biases right now?
from what I'm looking at, it seems like the immigration rate to Canada and the average weekly earnings, the adjusted earnings, have stayed more or less stagnant for decades in Canada.
Yes.
These factors have not really moved, with the exception of the COVID crisis. The
Can I
COVID
get my assistant to make like an Excel document? Will you put it on your thing if I make an Excel document that like a actual statistical graphs on this?
Sure, give it a go. So the COVID crisis
Not right now.
corresponds to, it correlates with two significant changes, both an increase in the average weekly earnings for a Canadian and also in a decrease in immigration. Now, here's the thing, and here's the problem, okay? The problem is it also corresponds to massive changes in almost every other economic and political chart you could possibly graph. The COVID pandemic led to so many shifts in government policy, please. It led to
wait.
No, I let you go on for a while, and I'd like to finish.
This isn't me arguing. This is a proposal. Can we look at America, which had a similar pandemic problem, I don't know, like their immigration versus their wage growth for that period?
Let me finish with Canada first, please.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There are so many other giant seismic shifts that happened during that time period that it's really difficult to know whether or not these two factors are actually causatively associated. Now, it's tempting to go, oh, well, it makes sense. A decrease in, or sorry, an increase in labor would lead to a decrease in wages. Haha, Econ 101. And that is sometimes true.
Also
But
housing though.
broader, well, I'm talking about the wages first, but our
Hmm.
broader understanding of how that Econ 101 tendency plays out has actually largely been wrong. From the data that I'm familiar with, and not just in America, I also have data from France. Immigration does not
Europe
depress
doesn't count.
local wages. So, given that we don't have any methodological correlation here, my consideration is it possible that these are just correlative? We had an increase in wages
Oh, for sure.
and a drop in integration, but those aren't necessarily connected to each other.
I can agree that that's possible. Can you agree that it is possible that I'm correct too?
I would
Just
just
because
need
we,
evidence to show it.
yeah, I was proving a bit, but so first off, you talked about the H1 thingies in America for tech workers,
Yes.
right? They take the same wages, but our temporary foreign workers don't.
Um. Oh well, I
Th-
then I think that their wages should
That's a
be
shitty.
increased.
I'm inclined to agree, but that's not why we're bringing in a million workers.
Do you think that if you increased to par so that they get paid the same amount
They
as
stop
local
bringing in.
workers?
Mm, not like yes, I guess not minimum wage because no one works for minimum wage because it's not livable. But yes, like if like you can't do that though because the worker from another country is gonna it's because they're all in the subways and like Tim Hortons and shit, right? And so that worker is gonna take like minimum wage or lower, and they do, and then a Canadian worker is gonna take like 20, and then they're gonna start working at a subway or whatever. So I guess if like you somehow magically figured out at what price an already here, let's say second generation Canadian would work for, and then said that was the price you have to get temporary foreign workers in at, then I think they would stop existing.
The issue that I have is that, and maybe this is just a difference in conceptualization, but when I think of immigration, I grew up in Los Angeles. The immigrants that I saw, legal or illegal, were largely Mexicans who worked either illegally under the minimum wage, which
Wouldn't you say that suppresses wages then?
no, it doesn't
Because
actually, because
if he's
they're
doing
not.
general labor, then that's an increase in the supply of general laborers, which is going to take away wages from regular
And not
workers.
just the supply of general laborers, but the demand for everything laborers need. So that guy may be working a $5 a day like agriculture job, but he shops at the same grocery stores that non-immigrants work at. He gets his he rents from a place, he pays rent to a non-immigrant
Landlord.
who to a landlord, yeah, who owns the property. Like the
But
problem
we're
is
talking about
people
wages.
always
That
talk.
doesn't.
Yeah,
You're talking about profits for landlords and corporations that own grocery stores, and
yeah,
we're talking about wages of
and
workers. You're
and
such a
the
neoliberal.
demand for housing and the demand for goods and services, which means that more
Yes, goods
people
and
get
services
employed.
are provided by corporations.
But yeah, and through workers that they employ, and that means that their wages don't decrease. More
I don't
workers
think.
doesn't just mean more labor, it means more demand that has to be fulfilled with more labor.
Do you
It
think a
balances
worker?
out.
Do you think a worker like an illegal immigrant provides an additional job through all of his consumption? I'm not familiar with any
Yes, the
like.
data indicates they seem to provide 1.02 jobs actually, because they add about
That's
2%
pretty
wages on
tight.
average
That's pretty tight.
to American
But
workers.
so they add 1.02 wages, but they also add a supply of labor that is below the wages.
Well, I
Because
don't endorse the exploitation of their
supply and
labor.
demand, but supply and demand doesn't. It's also about like price. If I forget the term for it, supply and demand isn't the only thing that affects things, right? If you have the only house and there's 10 people and they all desperately want that house, and your house therefore is $1 trillion, but they don't have $1 trillion, then they don't buy the house. At a certain point, the actual wages that the people are demanding affect the supply and demand. So if that labor provides,
And
or
I
if that
agree they should
laborer,
be paid more. But we
I agree with
know
that, but
that
they're not.
they don't actually hurt the economy or hurt
No, that's
wages.
not what you said. You said that they increased the supply of workers by 1.02
No,
by
they increase
by their demand.
their
Yes,
presence, the demand that they provide as
yes,
a person in America
but
increases the average
yes.
wage of
Gosh, you
Americans.
gotta let me finish a point. You're not as quick as me. So it increases the demand for labor by 1.02. However, it increases the supply of labor by more than one because the supply of labor of that laborer working below minimum wage is supply of labor at a lower price.
That does not take away from the wages of other American workers.
Yes, it does. It suppresses the
No,
overall wages.
it doesn't. See,
Yes,
it was
he's
to
an
your
American. He's being paid less.
it was
He's
to your
literally
advantage.
mathematically.
It was
literally mathematically.
It was to your please. It was to your advantage when talking
Please.
about a phenomena which was specific to 2022 Canada, because there is not
Do you
going
not
to be
follow
any.
my logic?
Can you wait? Hold on. I'm actually gonna put my foot down here. Shut the f up. We have 10 minutes more to this, okay? You had an advantage in talking about something that there can be no methodological research on because it's a Canadian phenomena from less than a year ago.
Do you have methodological research
yes
on illegal immigrants?
Yes,
Specific.
Rethinking the Effect of Immigration on Wages from Gianmarco I.P. Ottaviano. It's a working paper 12497. It was published in the National Bureau of Economic Research. Yes, happily, yes. Here, right here, okay? You can take a look at this. It's quite long. Now, what we know is that immigration in America does not decrease the average wage of an American worker. And the reasons for that are really complicated. The problem that I have is that you keep deferring back towards imagined simplicity whenever it's convenient to you. But then whenever the data doesn't line up in your favor, we sort of hand wave away the results.
But there's data in my favor too that you just say that it's not done by an economist specifically, so it doesn't count.
Where?
I gave it to you.
Oh, so citing data points is not the same as methodological research.
A major housing crisis in Canada that correlates with an immigration rate 3 times.
So
any
again,
other country
spurious,
is like straightforward.
spurious causative association. Mistakes like this would have you flunked in your classes, even for physics papers.
No, that's not how
you
physics
need
works. Physics
to.
is empirical.
This is literally correlation causation arguments. You realize you're actually doing the it happened at the same
in
time.
Physics, you dummy. Physics is like
absolutely.
Equations.
Wait. Yes, you do. Research and lab work in physics absolutely means narrowing down confusing and confounding variables to make sure that you've centered on. You don't need to have a PhD. This is 101 stuff. Did you even go to college?
Oh my God, Vosh, you're being a bit of a dick.
Did you go to college?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I went
and
to
did you
university.
not hear that correlation causation fallacy?
Yes. You're the one going with basic shit. You're the one who's going by basic axioms, and your basic axioms.
This isn't axioms. This is just methodology. You need to account for these very complicated topics. The problem that I have here is like, I genuinely don't know to what extent your righteous indignation is motivated by concern for the Canadian worker, because you're so obstinately unwilling to accept the idea. So you claimed that over-immigration to Canada hurts your workers, but then you say in your argument, maybe the amount of immigration America has is okay because proportionally we have less. Then I say, okay, here's data that our proportional amount is beneficial, and you argue against that as well.
No, I'm not. I've been trying not to argue with this. I've said that some of your data suggests that slight fluctuations in your immigration have actually had the opposite effect.
You've been steadfastly arguing against the idea that immigration improves American wages.
No, that's not what I've been saying. You keep shifting the conversation away.
Do you think that immigration...
Oh my God, let me get a sentence in,
Do you think that immigration could improve the wages of American workers?
Of course it can, within a narrow band of acceptability of 2 to 3% of your population, no higher. That was my point at the beginning. You keep changing it because you're a American obsessed with National Socialism and Nazis and racism. I'm just looking at the class dynamics, and you're being annoying.
So whatever America is doing works.
Yes, I said that. You need to listen, dude. You need to take fucking Adderall.
Chad, you're going to have to check my memory here. Did she or did she not argue against the idea of immigration being beneficial to the wages of American workers?
I said, you kept jumping to that. I said that Americans' immigration is currently at a good rate. And
why did you argue? Why did I keep saying that
because you keep jumping around and I have ADHD as bad as you.
I was talking about Los Angeles in the context of Mexican immigrants, legal or illegal. I was very specific, not jumping around, and you kept arguing with the premise.
because you won't stick on any of my premises. You jump to a premise that's outside of the scope of my argument, and then you go, haha, and I'm lost in your argument before I realize that we've jumped away from mine.
There
It's
wasn't
a
even
rhetorical trick.
there
It's just
wouldn't
because
have
you're a
even been
fucking
an
debate bro.
argument if you hadn't
Oh my God.
reflexively argued
I
against
said
something
the
you're now
fuck
claiming to agree with.
because you're very talk overy and it's difficult to get a word in. For the fifth time, at the start of the argument and several times, I said, Vosh, where do I go for this debate? And you didn't reply to me in the email. And I went, where am I going? And you didn't reply to me. And you're talking about Israel. And it's like, Vosh, I need to. And then you gave me your disc. No, sorry, different thing. No, at the very start of this argument, I said, immigration is fine and American immigration is at a good rate. And my argument is that opening the floodgates, as you say, kind of hyperbolically to a bunch of Nazis is fine isn't actually true. That going well above the current American rate is actually dangerous, and that it did occur in a country, my country, which is having serious economic turmoil. But you won't even talk about that because you're obsessed with the narrow band of American immigration. That's fine. You won't listen. You're just looking to win. I'm trying to actually debate and talk about a topic outside of the scope of your shitty politics in your shitty country, and you won't let me talk about that. You want to talk about American immigration, which is fine, which I said 4 fucking times, Vosh. Is our hour up?
No, you still have 5 minutes to go if you want to continue.
That's a good closing statement. You want to do anything on that? Jade49.com. cb.jade49.com. I'm on Chaturbate right now.
Oh, hold on.
Is anyone watching this? Oh my God.
If you bring more people over to your chat, you might depress the wages of the people who are already on your stream.
That's not how it works. I'm the bourgeoisie and the money flows upwards into my, but.
How insincere your claims were. Well, I guess I kind of hope that you cared a little bit about this.
I do, but we never even talked about my thing. It's just like your Nazi conversation.
What was your
where
thing?
You're trying that over immigration beyond a normal band that America and most countries have is actually dangerous. That was my whole point, but we never debated it. It's just like that fascist. He wouldn't let you talk about the things you actually want to talk about. He just went around in rhetorical circles outside of the scope of the argument. You did the same fucking thing.
By
now,
talking
you're not a
about
Nazi,
Mexicans in Los Angeles?
Yes, because we're not talking about an immigration within the scope of normal immigration rates.
Well, I had tried to discuss
you've got to fucking listen.
I had tried to discuss the things in the context.
You just shit on me the whole time and acted like I was stupid, and you know I'm not stupid.
Very specific spurious association.
You can hear me not being stupid.
But
using big words does not make you smart.
All right.
Just say city.
Calm it down. Calm it down.
I know all the words.
All right. I can tolerate it for a bit, but man, I was hoping we could have a real convo there. I thought it was like a fun premise. I certainly don't think less of like Chaturbate streamers or whatever than I do of the degenerates who stream on Twitch or YouTube. But I still don't know like if she cared or was pretending to. Okay, so I guess we can do kind of like an informational wrap up there so that people watching don't lose as many brain cells as they might otherwise. Where the brain cells are trickling out and we're going to scoop them and we're going to push them back in. Okay, so what she was offering there was a hypothesis that might be true. The problem is she was asserting that it's true without fulfilling sort of the evidentiary requirements. The problem is when you're talking about stuff like the relationship between big like economic forces in a country, these forces are so huge that sometimes the impact of a decision can only really be evidenced like decades later. These are really tough things to track for, and it usually involves, if you're going to do like a big methodological sort of breakdown, a lot of really complicated math. Now, economists are often sort of lambasted for lying to benefit the interests of the bourgeoisie. And do they do that? Well, yeah, sure. But in reality, in my experience, econ papers and what economists are said to say when right-wing politicians talk about them are often two very different things. Even the Heritage Foundation, which is not exactly like a bulwark of progressive values, has begrudgingly admitted that immigration does not have a negative effect on American workers' wages. I'm not saying that we should uncritically trust everything economists say. I'm saying that we shouldn't be anti-intellectual and we should look at the data provided. Now, if you have a disagreement with the methodology, I mean, I'm very surprised you could do that without having actually read the paper. There is comparable data in the French labor market, and this famous research on the Mariel boat lift, which described the effects of a wave of Cuban immigrants on Miami, indicated that despite increasing Miami's labor force by 7%, that's a lot. That's a basically overnight 7% increase in the labor force in a city is massive. Had basically no impact on native wages, even for low skilled workers. So the overall data seems to indicate that this is a highly overstated issue. And I think the reason it's overstated is because it's usually in the interest of the bourgeoisie to blame immigrants and blame ethnic divides when they greedily hike up their prices or cut wages. So whenever, and this has been happening for centuries, by the way, whenever people start getting agitated at your good old robber baron in Philadelphia or whatever, you can go, oh, well, it's not me, it's all those Irish and Italians. And then people get mad at the Irish and Italians, and it doesn't solve anything. It's a way of displacing class antagonism under racial antagonism. Now, is it possible that her hypothesis was correct? Yes. That's why I kept asking for evidence to back it up, because these two things happened at the same time does not mean one of them caused the other. That is not how that works, of course. That's correlation, causation. Anyway, she got increasingly belligerent there towards the end, so I don't know if there would have been any point in explaining this to her. But yeah, you do need a sensible immigration rate. I don't know what the deal is with Canada specifically. I was trying to Google some stuff on the side to see if I could find any, like, big game-changing article, and it seemed like there were people who were saying, oh, maybe it is immigration, maybe it's not immigration, maybe immigration helped, actually. That's what complicated subjects tend to get out of people. But I don't think she believed much of that, and I think she mostly just wanted to advertise her stuff. Bro, she sexually harassed Vosh multiple times so bad. Yeah, to be clear, I don't really mind that much because I have a pretty tough skin. That was a lot of that was sexual harassment. I've never flirted with that woman. I think it's incredibly inappropriate to say, like, oh, you can come over to Canada to have sex with me with absolutely no prompting. My first engagement with her was over email. I think that it's genuinely quite disgusting to do that. So yeah, I don't think very highly of her. Very nasty behavior. Yeah. Thought she was mostly joking. Okay, reverse the genders. That's the joking. It was joking. That doesn't mean, imagine if I was talking to somebody and I pulled that card. Like, no, of course not. The thing about causality not being in physics was insane. There's a lot of variance with how it's applied, but holy shit. Yeah. We don't have a correlation, causation in physics. It's just math equations, too. The Ukrainian refugees in Poland plugged a huge gap in the labor force, which is pretty comparable. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, there are a huge number of Ukrainian refugees that have flooded into Poland. Poland has been experiencing labor shortages because of an aging population and large number of Polish workers leaving the country for other EU countries. The massive inflow of Ukrainian refugees has boosted Poland's labor supply and contributing to its economy outperforming the rest of Europe. Nice. And this is with a huge wave as well. Okay, 15.4 million have passed through Poland. How many are in Poland? Okay, the number listed are about 1 million, and this is officially recognized numbers, so I suspect the total number is larger than this. But this is a huge amount of people to just flood in. I like how a lot of them are in Russia, yeah. Vosh in her Cope stream, she was saying she did it for attention while thirsting for you, calling you a Nazi while reassuring chat she is not drunk. Damn, guys, I don't know. I feel like this is a huge blow to the optics of the trans femme community. I don't know, man. Hypersexual sex worker comes in, sexually harasses, super arrogant, interest in STEM but no clear knowledge of it. Hard copium, also alcohol problem. Dude, I don't know, man. I feel like the reputation of the community is devastated right now. She's not a sister, but yeah, you're teetering from a thread. Anyway, I don't talk about her anymore. Clearly, it's just an attention thing, which is very disappointing. But there's not much to be done about it. I don't want to hear any more about her.